This time next year, voters will be casting ballots for who will represent them in their local, city, and regional councils. It's the level of government most directly involved with delivering services to citizens, but is a diverse enough slate of candidates coming forward to reflect the communities they serve. Let's get some perspective from 4 elected officials, all in their municipalities. Lynn Dollin, Mayor of Innisfil and Deputy Warden of the County of Simcoe, Timmins City Councillor Kristin Murray, Peteborough City Councillor Kemi Akapo, and Oakville Town Councillor Jasvinder Sandhu. Welcome to you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Really excited to have this conversation because it seems like everywhere you look, there's an election happening. But as I said, municipal elections are really, really important. And Lynn, I wanted to start with you. The Association of Municipalities of Ontario, or AMO, just launched a campaign called We All Win. What is the goal of this campaign?
Thanks, Nam. We All Win promotes the understanding that municipal governments serve the public better when they reflect the diversity of their communities. We think that having that diverse voice makes stronger and more sustainable communities. Municipalities are the most accountable level of government, and we all win when the most accountable level of government is accountable to everyone.
And, you know, when we talk about who's representing who in these elections, in local elections, you know, everybody has a unique story. And I wanted to ask this question for all of you about how you started in this journey. Kemi, I wanted to start with you. You came to Ontario as an international student from Nigeria, correct?
That's correct.
How did you get and how did you become interested in running for office?
Well, it was a bit of a long journey for me, though I never actually anticipated becoming a politician, though I probably should have, because when I was a student at Trent University, I got involved with the Trent Central Student Association, which is essentially the student governing board for students at Trent, undergraduate students at Trent. So that really catapulted me into the life of politics, I would say. I saw that there were different needs that students had on campus, and I wanted to be a voice for the students and represent them. And then fast forward a couple of years, I started to get more involved in the city of Peteborough itself. And I noticed that the city council of the day did not reflect the Peteborough that I knew and the Peteborough that a lot of the residents that I interacted with knew as well. So I thought, well, there needs to be a voice that represents these people. And that really is what spurred me to decide to run and to be on city council.
I know you said there was a little bit of trepidation in running, but since you are now in that position to affect change, what would you say has maybe been the most impactful moment for you?
There have been several. I would say for me, some of the more impactful moments is when we're designing policy, because policy is really key and really does affect people on their everyday lives. So, for example, we recently have hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion officer for the city of Peteborough, which is a role that we never had before. So I believe our city council took a good step forward to hire this person and to ensure that anything that our municipality does has at least that lens of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the residents.
And Kristin, I wanted to come to you next. Hearing some of the accomplishments that Kemi has already had, what made you decide to run for office?
Yeah, I think multiple factors played into my decision. It's pretty obvious that in 2018, early 2018, the Human Rights Commissioner did visit the city of Timmins and mentioned that there was pervasive racism within our city. Being mixed race, Indigenous, and Black woman, you know, it just made sense for me to put my name forward. I've been working in this community for over 20 years and knew some of the needs, some of the things that needed to be addressed. And quite honestly, I had never seen anyone like myself around council table in the time that I've been in Timmins. So I just felt it necessary to have representation. It's so important.
Have you, since you have been in your position, because we do hear about all the barriers, we're going to talk about some of those barriers coming up in a few moments, but was there any moment when you were in the process of running that maybe you thought, this isn't for me?
I think there were some instances, you know, you really prepare yourself for the worst, because growing up mixed race in northern community, it's pretty obvious that Not everyone looks like you. So, my upbringing, moving from, Jane and Finch area in Toronto to Northern Ontario, really prepared me for a lot of what I would face as an adult. So I prepared myself for what conversations I thought would come, but honestly, I was surprised that it wasn't really something that people focused on, was my race. It was more about, my conversations. But at the same time, I felt, I didn't want people to label me as maybe Black, Indigenous, or a woman. And that's what I was standing on. It was really about some of the experiences, some of the skills and abilities that I bring to the table, not necessarily, the color of my skin. But that does also allow me to bring a different voice to the table. So it's been a great journey so far.
Jasvinder, hearing what Kristin was talking about, we do hear a lot about how we're so much more than just what we look like. We bring so much more to the table than the color of our skin, our gender, but it's also about the policies and our education, all those things. You have a really unique background. You were actually born in the UK and you emigrated from the US. What made you decide to run for office here in Ontario?
It's a really good question, Nam, and I think hats off to my council colleagues on the panel here, because it's kind of a similar thread and story. For me, it was always a vested interest. So being a newer Canadian, I've only been here for about 13 years. I saw a very kind of stark dichotomy between what we were kind of seeing around the council table and what I was seeing in my local community. And for me, as a young parent and a young advocate, I'm a lawyer. I was seeing kind of the lack of advocacy that I needed for things that were happening in our part of the town. So the part of the town that we live in is a newer part of Oakville, a lot of intense development in the area. And I wasn't seeing what I wanted as a resident. So I really thought that with that passion behind what I was seeing, I was going to be able to make a difference at the table. And I think my key takeaway for everybody that I talk to now and all the youth that I speak to on a pretty regular basis is you just can't be afraid. You have to go.
But that's great that you said that. I have this little thing that whenever I'm asked to do something that I'm afraid, I feel like that's when I should do it, like feel the fear and do it anyway. But were there moments that maybe you felt like this is a lot? Yes, you didn't see yourself represented, but to step into those positions also does take a lot of courage, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's with anything that we start new, and I think that's with anything that is difficult, quite frankly. I mean, running for politics isn't something that's easy. I will say that there are always times where things become a little bit difficult. And for me, having a young family, that was really kind of that mom guilt that trickled in through everything else that's in my daily life, even with my full-time job during the day. But you kind of just have to push past it and say, you know what, I'm doing this for not just myself, but also for my family and for everybody else. And there's always that light at the end of the tunnel.
And Lynn, what about yourself? What got you into politics?
Well, I've been in politics. I was first elected in 1994. My father was the one who kind of put the bug in my ear. And in 1991, when we were undergoing some amalgamations, but I had a toddler and was pregnant at the time. And certainly you didn't see any pregnant women on council in those days. And so I decided in 1994 I would try it because, after all, my youngest was going into JK and I was going to have all this time on my hands. So that's when I first decided to run. And I can totally relate to the mom guilt. And now that little guy has been married for 2 years.
Well, this is, yes, Jasvinder?
Sorry, Nam, I just wanted to jump in there to the mayor's comment. So I actually had a baby just before I ran for council. So I was on mat leave because I had so much time, right? And then during my first couple of years on council, I actually had another child. So I can completely relate, Mayor. I completely understand.
Jasvinder, you're making us all look bad.
No.
It's so great to hear all those stories because, as you all said, that representation does matter, and when you see it, you can be it. I wanted to bring in some numbers. According to AMO, in the last municipal election in 2018. Only 27% of all candidates were women. I wanted to get an idea from all of you what you thought why that is. And Kemi, I wanted to start with you. What might be the main deterrent to this lack of diversity?
That's a good question, and I think there are a couple of deterrents, and two that I can think of are, one is term limits. So as most of us know, folks who are incumbents are more likely to win if they choose to run again. So if you were sort of a newbie and you're running against a slate of incumbents, the chances of you winning and getting in are a little bit lower, particularly your first time around. So I think term limits is a thing that should be started and implemented rather, because it allows time for people to come in, do their work, and then exit and create space for other people as well. I also think that for most, at least in Ontario, councillors are a part-time position. So if you do not have that flexibility with your other job, if you don't have support at home, if you do have a family to take care of the family to assist you in that, it really is difficult to choose to run knowing that you're going to be, working essentially 2 full-time jobs with the lack of support. So I think term limits and being part-time are two of the bigger deterrents, particularly for women.
Just to build on what Kemi just said, Kristin, I don't know if a lot of people know that it's when you are a councillor, it is part-time work. What else do you think might be a deterrent to the lack of diversity that we're seeing?
I can definitely agree with what Kemi's saying about the part-time work, because I do have a full-time job in addition to being in post-secondary education, as well as raising two daughters as well. So I think that was the feedback that I got during my campaign, is how are you going to do this? It's just people's ideas or the criticisms around that mom guilt that some of the other panelists had mentioned before. And I also think that sometimes, if you don't have women on council, there's not this idea that I can do that too. So luckily for me in Timmins, there was a really strong councillor already elected. So I guess an incumbent, as Kemi had mentioned. And I really did look up to her because she just was like a force to be reckoned with. So, having those people you can draw from as sort of motivation or inspiration is also needed as well. So, panels like this really allowing us to speak and have other people hear about our experiences, because we started from nowhere. We weren't born politicians, but we grew into the roles that we have now. So.
Okay, I don't know if I'm really old or showing my age. When you said that, I just thought of Drake, started from the bottom, now we're here. Apologies to my children, who are probably really embarrassed at this point. But Jasvinder, Kristin mentioned, maybe the importance of having someone, a mentor, perhaps. What do you think are some of the other deterrents when we do talk about this lack of diversity?
Well, I think Kristin hit one of the nails on the head, like very, very succinctly. It was very kind of common during the election for me for people to ask, oh, well, you're a very busy full-time lawyer, you work on Bay Street, and how are you going to have time for me, your family, and this? And I don't think
Is
that
it annoying that, I was going to say,
yeah.
Do men get that same kind of question?
I don't think so. And certainly the other gentlemen that I've interviewed on council about the same thing have kind of alluded to the fact that they're not asked things like that. So I think that if you're thinking about things being a deterrent, I think that might be one of them is, how am I actually going to be able to manage all of this? We face a little bit more from a social pressure perspective. And I think that we face a little bit more just generally as people. We're like, okay, well, how am I actually going to make time for all of this when I already feel like I'm spread thin? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to build on what you were saying and ask Lynn, because I think we were talking about seeing the totality of an individual, but if you're knocking on doors and people are seeing a woman at the door and then they're making all of these assumptions, Lynn, how do we move away from that? And what are the deterrents can you add as why we're seeing this lack of diversity?
Well, I would agree that part-time is an issue, and I would argue that it is a part-time pay but a full-time job. Mm-hmm. And also that when you are first elected to council, when I was first elected to council, I think I paid more in childcare than I made. So that is definitely a deterrent. The good news is that when there's men and women equally on the ballot, they're elected as many times. It's just getting the names on the ballots, which is the hard part. And I would say another big deterrent, and probably would have If social media was around when I first ran, I probably wouldn't be here.
Why not?
Just dealing with the comments, and women particularly get much more negative and nasty comments on social media than men do.
Is anyone else here on social media, or do you stay away from it? Kemi, I see you nodding.
Yeah, so when I first started, I was on every platform. I was on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it, I was on there. And as time went on, I slowly started to remove myself from some of those platforms, just because the time to check and respond to everything was a lot, and it's just me, I don't have an assistant. But also the amount of vitriol that was being sent my way was I couldn't handle it, and it was too much. And I said, I don't deserve this. And my role as a counselor is not to deal with this hate that's being spewed towards me. So I've limited myself to just a couple of platforms now, which I find a little bit more manageable. But I 100% agree with the mayor, and that social media really has a huge impact, and more negative than positive.
Social media can be one of those tools that you are, accessible to the people that you're serving, but then you're getting all this other stuff. Kristin, I saw you nodding before.
Yeah, like Kemi, I started out on all of the social platforms, and I think it's because, I really ran a grassroots campaign with not a lot of money. My plan was not to take away from my children in order to campaign. So I utilized the resources that I had. And as time progressed, I realized where I was spending time. And, I prefer a really formal way of communicating with people, in terms of, I have a city issued phone number as well as email. And I think sometimes Facebook is just a different way to communicate, and it's not necessarily one that's effective in the way that I like to communicate with people. So I've backed off personally and professionally from Facebook. I love my Instagram. I'll probably never let that go. So I do have professional Instagram, as well as, Twitter is something I haven't really mastered yet. So.
Kristin, I'm with you. I don't know if I can quit my Instagram, but Jasvinder, Kristin brought up something that's really interesting, which is money. And a lot of people might not know that municipal candidates must fund and manage their own campaigns. In what ways do you think does this create barriers for communities that are historically underrepresented?
I mean, I think that the fact that they may not have access to funds in the same way would be an extreme deterrent. I think the counter to that, and the kind of positive to take away from this going forward, I think for any municipality, is to make sure that they can either bring things to council, so that council can approve the fact that there could be some type of a reimbursement structure, maybe not for the candidate, but maybe for people that wanted to contribute to that person's campaign, so that they're not carrying the brunt of all of the costs. That's certainly something that we do here in Oakville. We do a 50% return for anybody who'd like to contribute to a candidate's campaign, and I think that's beneficial for a lot of folks.
Lynn, some people might not know exactly what the functions of municipal councils. Can you give us a quick snapshot of what all of you do?
Yeah, basically everything that you take for granted is what municipal councils do. You turn on the tap and water comes out, you flush the toilet and it goes away, you put your bag of garbage out at the end of the driveway and it disappears. Not to mention the parks, the recreation programming, libraries. There's just so much that municipal councils do, and we do it on 9 cents of the tax dollar.
Kemi, did you want to add anything to that?
Lynn has hit the nail on the head. And another big one is transportation, which is one of my portfolios. So anytime you drive on the roads, or if you take public transit, that is your municipal government at work. And I think a lot of people don't realize that that's the municipal government until something doesn't work, or doesn't work the way you want it to. And then all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, who's responsible for this? Let me complain.
Well, how do we change that? Because I think when we talk about the federal election, it seems to be more, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it just seems to capture everybody's attention. When we do talk about municipal elections, this is stuff that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So Kristin, how do we get people to be more involved, to participate more, to vote? Because these are things that are affecting their lives on a day-to-day basis.
I think one of the things that was important during my campaign is we had kind of like a spreadsheet in terms of what the municipal politics does impact within our community, right? So getting people to realize that, the simple things like the roads, the water are a municipal issue, not necessarily federal. So it's not everyone follows politics at our level quite closely as they do with the federal election, unfortunately. But I think that has a lot to do with, media, the news, having bigger budgets. But I think, as we spread awareness about our function, I think people will really come to appreciate our roles.
And Jasvinder, in your area, what is the voter turnout like?
Very low. I mean, in comparison to the federal and the provincial elections, we're looking at around 27 to 30% turnout in the town of Oakville when it comes to a municipal election. I think the challenge that we face is not only getting the word out to folks, but also just generally interest. We're dealing with the stuff that, the mayor just mentioned it, it's the mundane. It's the stuff that's not typically like, a fancy topic that people are really kind of thinking about, maybe even on a daily basis, even though their days are impacted by municipal government on a daily basis. I think that we've been really kind of focusing hard over the last little bit and really kind of trying to work hard with our local youth through the AMO Youth Engagement Council to check to see if there's something that we can do to help youth become engaged in municipal politics at a very early age and an earlier level. And I think that if they're able to carry that on over, high school and through university, that interest will continue to grow. And then we won't have the same level of turnout because they'll already be engaged at that young level and continue on.
In our final minutes here, I want to ask everybody else that same question. Lynn, I'd like to start with you. What is the voter turnout for you, and what are some things that we can do to get more people involved from a wide pool of candidates?
Yes, we also have quite a low voter turnout, and certainly we need to
Do you know what percentage?
work on that. I would say about 37%. We did see a bit of an uptick when we went to electronic voting because we do have seasonal residents. So that did help. But I think just being the mentors and mentorship is something I think that's extremely important, and tapping people on the shoulder and encouraging them to put their name forward, I think would help.
How do you do that? Because I know in the past for you, you were discouraged from, you had some experiences where because another woman was running, there was this idea that maybe two women couldn't run. How do we change that?
Absolutely. We have to change that because women also have to support other women. And we need, when I knock on a door and somebody would say to me, why aren't you at home looking after your children? We need to change those voices. And
sorry, my mouth is, I can't believe people would say that. Sorry, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, it's fine, and it has gotten better. There's no question about that. But we just need to support each other. Mentorship is so important. I'm very fortunate to have former Mayor McCallion as a mentor, and she has been such a solid person that to count on.
And Kristin, what's the voter turnout in your region? And also, when we think about next year's municipal elections, what are some ways in which we can ensure we get a wider pool of candidates, and that's more women, more racialized people, more youth, new immigrants? Kristin?
So in 2018, there was about more than half of the people eligible to vote came out and vote. And I think there was some contentious issues happening within the city that really allowed for people to be engaged during the election period. So we had a really good turnout at the last election, surprisingly. And I think really to get people engaged is for them to be. That's a really tough question because I think, our community is diverse, but there are some factors as to why people don't put their name forward.
What are some of those factors?
I think really having to be that name for the group, so myself, I'm the voice for Indigenous people, I'm the voice for Black people, and that's not necessarily correct, right? Because I think, we all have various experiences, individual experiences. I may support a lot of issues that are very diverse, but to say I speak for every person of a certain race isn't so. So I think that's a deterrent in some ways, because you're really called to task when there's issues, right? People will call me and ask me, well, why did you vote a certain way on this? You're Indigenous, you should have voted this way. So I think that there's those factors that really deter a lot of people. But at the same time, I think if you think about all the positives that are to come from it and the change that's made, and you just making, my daughters, they look up to some of the conversations that I have. They're really paying attention to what's happening in the community. They call me to task on potholes on my street. So I think, it's really interesting to see how people are engaged.
We have about 2 minutes. Kemi, I'll give you 1 minute, and Jasvinder, I'll give you the last minute. Kemi?
Yeah, so our voter turnout here was also low. I believe it was 33%. But I agree with Lynn that having electronic voting is certainly helpful and allows more people to engage. One thing that we can do is, it's all been mentioned before, but certainly being that mentor role, I think, is key. Just last night, I spoke with a bunch of newcomers to Canada, most of whom have only been here for about 2 months. And I talked to them about, what does government look like in Canada? What roles do municipal governments play? How can they get involved? And then I had 2 people email me after saying, you know what, I might be interested in politics further down the line. Can we set up a one-on-one conversation? So I think it's those one-on-one conversations that really do make such a huge difference.
And Jasvinder, you've got 30 seconds.
Sure. I'll just kind of layer onto that and say that the tide is really kind of turning. That mentorship piece really matters. We went from 7% women on Oakville's council before 2018 to now 40%. So that mentorship is certainly something that's helpful, because the more people we see that look like us, the more people will actually want to put their names forward.
When you see it, you can be it. Thank you all so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. And I'm guessing you'll be running again next year. So best wishes. And for more information on the We All Win campaign, you can log on to amo.ca. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.